It is 33 years after Moshood Kashimawo Olawale Abiola won the presidential election. The 1993 Nigerian presidential election and its annulment, also known as the June 12 election, is one of the most significant events in Nigeria's political history. It is widely regarded as the freest and fairest election ever conducted in the country. Abiola won in 19 states, plus the Federal Capital Territory of Abuja, including strong performances in parts of the north. For example, Kano, where he beat his rival, Bashir Tufa. He met the constitutional requirements of majority votes and geographical spread, at least 1/3 in most states. On June 23, 1993, the Babangida military government abruptly annulled the election before the final official results could be declared by the National Electoral Commission at that time, NEC. Well, we had massive protests, especially in the southwest, leading to loss of lives and economic disruption. Now, in November 1993, General Sani Abacha seized power in a coup. Abiola was arrested in 1994 after declaring himself president. He remained in detention until his death on July 7, 1998, under suspicious circumstances, just days after Abacha's own death. Kudirat Abiola, one of his wives, was assassinated in 1996 while campaigning for her husband's release. This is the Real Broadcasting Network, and I am Isaac Barr. Join us in the studio for our Democracy Day special to expound on the lessons from that period and our democratic journey is the son of the late MKO Abiola, Abdul Abiola. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Such a pleasure to have you being here.
Anytime.
To start off this conversation, as the son of MKO Abiola and the late Kudirat Abiola, how has your family's direct experience shaped your personal view of Nigeria's democratic struggle?
Well, and there's no doubt that it has affected me in many, many, many ways. You have to understand that that whole saga really altered the course of my growth and my trajectory in life. I believe that very much. I believe that if not for the loss of both my parents, I could probably have been something totally different than I am now. But the loss also taught me a couple things about who my family and my parents were. It told me that there were people who believed in justice, fairness, equality. It basically showed me that when you have a conviction and you have a purpose, there's no limit that there's nothing you shouldn't do to accomplish your goals. And especially when the objective of your goal is something that is altruistic, it's not something that is personal, it's not like a greed thing, or it's not like a personal thing, it's something that would affect the generality of the Nigerian populace, the masses, which is very, very important that we understand that, a child that is not taken care of today will become something that we will not want to see tomorrow. And I think it's important that we understand that. So for me, at first I was very sad. I've lost my parents. It's a disaster. I had to escape. I had to go through Cotonou to leave the country. These things were very traumatic for me, especially at a young age. I think I was about eight or nine. I had a younger brother who was about 7, and we're both alone in Cotonou, getting on an airplane to go to America to see my sister and my brothers, because we basically didn't have any family in Nigeria. Well, we had family, but my sisters felt more comfortable with us being with them in the United States than being in Nigeria, especially after they just killed my mom on the streets of Lagos. So it was very traumatic for us. But like I said, as I grew older and I started to realize why they did what they did, it now dawned on me that it was important that they took that stance, because somebody has to fight for their own. The Americans fight for the Americans, the British fight for the British. the Nigerian people should fight for themselves, and then we need leaders who are ready to fight for their people. So it was perfectly understandable for me to put myself in their shoes and say, what would I have done in that position? And as far as I'm concerned, I would have done the same thing they did. I would have stood for justice, for equality, equity. These concepts might be just English words in a dictionary, but they have significant meaning behind them. And I think so. Yeah, it was very painful, but like I said, I channeled that anger and I've channeled the anger into something more positive, trying to move the needle forward, trying to change the narrative. Let it not be a sad story about MKO Abiola and Alex Koro. Let it be a story that this was the birth of the beginning of democracy striving in the country. Let it be something that solves the issues that my father said he was going to solve in 1993. Farewell to poverty, having no child go home hungry, having no child sleep in the forest. These are this is just basic human rights situations that in 2026 has no place in any country, not to mention my own loved country like Nigeria. So, yeah.
Your father won what a lot of people still refer to as the freest and fairest election Nigeria has ever had till date. Knowing what you know now, with age, with time that has passed and all of that, what do you think actually made those in authority as at that time to annul the election? And knowing those things now, how do you think they affect the country the way it is right now?
Oh, well, yes, it was acclaimed to be the fairest and fairest election. But you have to understand that, before 1993 elections, I think we were basically in a military government. I think we had a Babangida for 8 years. So I channeled that anger and I've channeled the anger into something more positive, trying to move the needle forward, trying to change the narrative. Let it not be a sad story about MKO Abiola and Alex Koro. Let it be a story that this was the birth of the beginning of democracy striving in the country. Let it be something that solves the issues that my father said he was going to solve in 1993. Farewell to poverty, having no child go home hungry, having no child sleep in the forest. These are this is just basic human rights situations that in 2026 has no place in any country, not to mention my own loved country like Nigeria. So, yeah.
Your father won what a lot of people still refer to as the freest and fairest election Nigeria has ever had till date. Knowing what you know now, with age, with time that has passed and all of that, what do you think actually made those in authority as at that time to annul the election? And knowing those things now, how do you think they affect the country the way it is right now?
Oh, well, yes, it was acclaimed to be the fairest and fairest election. But you have to understand that, before 1993 elections, I think we were basically in a military government. But I think we had a Babangida for 8 years. So I think there was a general consensus across the geopolitical zone that we don't want military governments anymore. We wanted a civilian to lead us. And I think it was not even only in Nigeria, it was also across Africa. If you notice in ANC's struggle, there were so many different struggles for a democratic process to take hold in Nigeria. So yeah, so Abiola's elections were seen that way because first of all, the Nigerian people were already tired of the military government, and now they were also now given an option to choose. And that's the thing about human nature. We should have the ability to choose who we want to lead us. And once that opportunity was given to the Nigerian people, we had debates, we had people who wanted to lead the country, telling the people what they intend to do, how they intend to do those things. It gave Nigerian people more understanding of what, was at stake. We don't have that. I don't think we have that as much today. But it gave people, it actually gave the Nigerian people a better understanding of who intended to lead them. And I think most people decided that Abiola was the person. The reason the election was annulled is very simple. Abiola happened to be from the Southwest. if you know the situation in Nigeria, you know that the Northerners apparently have the numbers. So the situation they had, the powers that be at the time had assumed that because he was from the Southwest, that he was running against somebody from the North, that it was basically not a contest at all, and that Alhaji Tofa, His Excellency Alhaji Tofa, would have basically been the one announced to be the winner. But my father also proved that he debunked that premise. The thing about it is, like, we talk about ethnic regions. We talk about these things like it means things. What is important now is that we need to be one whole. So, and Abiola, before actually attempting to be president, had actually visited every nook and cranny of this nation, and not only visited, he probably took a wife or two on his trips, or he met somebody there that he married. So he had relationships with people. He had built bridges over, like, let's say about 20 years of his life. I think he lived for like 26 years after he became extremely rich. So he had made a lot of friends, and people knew who he was. He not only making friends, he was donating to universities, he was helping build churches and mosques. So he had shown that he was not a religious bigot or anything. So when he came up and said Muslim tickets, also another thing the military government had assumed would be a negative to his campaign, people, because they trusted who he was. And the thing about it is that we have Muslims, Christians, idol worshippers. They say one thing when they're worshiping, and then they do the complete opposite. So I think Abiola has shown through his actions, because I can say anything I want to say. I can tell you this and that and that, but what I do will tell you really who I am. So Abiola has shown through his actions that he was more of a nationalistic approach to life and to governance, and was able to sell himself to the Nigerian people. So yeah, they annulled the election, and that has affected us tremendously, because, like I said, the Nigerian people had determined that they didn't want the military government, and they were ready to make a choice. The second that they had made that choice, they should have let the process go through. You see, that process, if allowed to flourish, would have been actually something that I call the birth of a nation. It would have been something that would have tied us all together, because those promises that my father had promised would have definitely been kept. Because Abiola was not just working to be president when he was sworn in to be president. He had already started consulting with professors across the world, Nigerian professors across the world, about how can we solve these problems. He had made so many comments about why he thinks there's so many problems. So I think he had an idea, he had a plan. The plan was truncated, and that was traumatic for the Nigerian psyche as a whole. We have not recovered from that trauma.
Well, talking about that, down the road in February 2025, the then leader, Ibrahim Babangida, admitted in his memoir, which he wrote, that your father clearly was the winner of that election. And also on June 12, actually, June 12, later on in the days, was declared Democracy Day in Nigeria, which actually replaced May 29 by President Muhammadu Buhari, the immediate past president, God rest his soul, in 2018. And MKO Abiola was posthumously awarded the Grand Commander of the Federal Republic, GCFR, and that's Nigeria's highest honor. Now, all of this, how significant is that acknowledgement for your family and for national healing?
Well, it definitely is definitely significant. I'm not going to try to minimize it, because I can tell you exactly what happened the day of. First of all, hearing that I knew Abiola won the elections. Anybody who had, even the blind, knew Abiola. The deaf, he knew Abiola won the election. It was not a discussion to be had. So Babangida coming to tell me 30 years later that Abiola won the election, I'm saying, sir, it was not necessary. But fine, he did it, which is good, because there were some people in Nigeria who still believed the lie that he had told at the time, that Abiola did not win due to some issues. So it's better if the person himself who told the lie is coming back to debunk himself. Alhamdulillah, we thank Allah for that. But I'm just going to go further to say that the honor is well, and it comes as well that you honor the person who sacrificed. But like June 12 was just not Abiola. It was just not Kudura. There were millions of Nigerians who suffered, who died, who lost financial They lost the financial backing because they had to leave the country. Somebody's gone exile. So many things that happened. So, it's more of like a consolation prize. But for me, I think that, we talk about Abiola like, oh, Abiola was just the man that wanted to rule. No, he had a vision. He had a plan. If you really want to honor the man, just execute the June 12 Hope 93 manifesto. It spelled it out for you, hook, line, and sinker, what he wanted to do with health, education. So all I'm just trying to say is that it's well and good. Nigerian people or the government, they're very good when it comes to doing a budget for a function that doesn't mean anything, that doesn't help anybody. But when it comes to doing the real work, we're found wanting. So yeah, alhamdulillah, Buhari did it. Nobody thought he would do it because apparently my father was the one who got him out of office in '84 when he was military governor. But like I said, alhamdulillah, we thank Allah for that. My father once in one of his interviews when he was talking about his Abiola babes, going traveling with his team across the country, that all African countries have honored me. It's only Nigeria that has refused to honor me. Maybe one day they will. And one day they actually did. So he had a vision, he had a premonition. It was above all our leaders combined, and they all know it.
It's really funny that you actually could talk like your father.
I idolized him. There's something about Abiola. I was very young, so when you're young and you see your dad, he's like Superman. Your mom's there. Like these are like the heroes to you, right? I never maybe got to the age where maybe I started to see like I said, context matters. I never, or just being able to capture some of his inadequacies. So sometimes when I talk about Abiola, I'm like, oh, daddy was this, daddy was that. And I'm looking at my older sister, Hafsa, and she's like, are you talking about the same person? So I guess maybe I'm still looking at Abiola in that I've idolized him to such a point where he just cannot do no wrong.
Good thing that you did, because back then, in his campaign days, I remember clearly he ran on Hope 92. He actually was mentioning a couple of things which you started mentioning. And our president today ran on Hope 2, actually trying to renew hope. Now, if you compare both hopes, what would you say of our country today?
Wow. Okay. Well, first of all, you have to understand that His Excellency Bola Ahmed Tinubu was a strong supporter of the late Chief MKO Abiola. He was always, with famous pictures where Abiola was fighting for his mandate, Asiwaju was right behind. Matter of fact, they even tried to assassinate him. I believe that what Abiola was trying to solve, Asiwaju didn't get it until like about 30 years later, about something like this, 20-something years later. The problem was compounded to the nth degree. So what we had at one point now has become more of a life-threatening disease. So I think some of the decisions he had to make were decisions that, if maybe not taken, we might not necessarily have a nation to speak of. So I can't really judge the aspect, because we're talking about two time periods, right? So we can't really say, what I did in 1993 will be work in 2026. But what I can say is that we as a nation have to join hands with government to fix this country. The last elections, we had 93 million people with voters' cards, and only 23 million people voted. Now, with those numbers, nothing can ever work. We need all Nigerians who are able to do their duty and come out and speak their own and say what they want to say, or just record their own agreement or disagreement on a certain issue. It's important that because like I said, Abiola was not going to fix Nigeria by himself. Nigeria is a big country, but Abiola knew that the Nigerian people, if led properly, will fix this country. And I think that's what's most important. We understand that we are the ones with the power. We are the ones that will change things. Nobody's going to do it for us. The Americans are not going to come and do it. The British will not do it. We have to do it ourselves. And once we get engaged, once we start coordinating with ourselves, things will start to work out in a better direction, or in a more promising direction, especially for the next generations to come.
Now, everyone agreed that had he succeeded to be president, he would have been the best for the nation around that time, in the 90s and all of that. So, looking at what he promised us as at that time, what aspects of those things are still missing in our democracy and in our nation today?
Abiola was a true Democrat, so he believed in free and fair elections, he believed in equity, he believed in justice. I think these things are not just words in a dictionary, they have meanings behind them. Today we have issues with all these things. Our elections are not seen as free and fair. I think poverty is at a level now that people are buying votes, people are buying elections, people are buying seats. So, when it becomes a transactional thing and it's not a selfless giving back to your nation thing, you're just doing this as a source of like another investment. You can basically put governance as a portfolio and do a business plan on why I need to get a loan from a bank so I can go and run for office. Normally what happens is you become like an accountant, a doctor, like a general, anything you become in life, you reach the heights of your profession and then you decide you want to give back. It's more of a way of your posterity. You're trying to preserve your legacy kind of thing. But what we find in Nigeria is become more of a business, it's a venture now. Matter of fact, we have little caucuses of people who decide who goes where. And so it's not necessarily people, we're not selecting based on merit, it's based on who I know. And if that's the case, we're not creating a balanced society. And when you have injustice somewhere, you have injustice everywhere.
All right, I want to take a step back a little bit. You mentioned President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. When he was a senator then, he actually talked about the support that he had for your late father, supporting his cause and everything. And it's on record that I think it was August, it was in 1993, when he actually spoke in the Senate floor, talking about what your late father has done and all of that. But looking at that time, and now, do you think our president right now, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, still has that culture, still has that drive, that democratic drive that he had back then?
Well, like I said, people change. You don't stay. Nobody is static. We're fluid. So people change. What I would say is I would have loved to have seen the Asiwaju of the Nadeko days. There's something about when you're in the trenches. There's that. You're hunting. You're looking for something. After so long of maybe being the Lion of Bodilon, the King Maker. These things. They say power corrupts, but absolute power corrupts absolutely, right? So you have to understand, and the longer you stay in that mindset, especially the way we do it in Nigeria, it's more of once, like, if I were in that, like today, if I told you I wanted to run for governor, and I left this room and I walked back in, everybody would stand up, Your Excellency. I've not gotten there, but so we have a nature where we idealize our leaders in such a way where we remove them from the equation, and they now reside above us. It shouldn't be the case. We need to understand that our leaders are part of us, and they need to discuss. They need to have we need to have those conversations. But like I said, His Excellency he has done a lot. Like we can't refute that. Some of the policies I wouldn't like. Maybe I wouldn't have gone that direction, or I don't think maybe my father would have done it in the way he did. But I think he felt that he had to do it this way, and I can't object to that. That was his own opinion. For instance, I'll give you an example. When he said he wanted to remove subsidy, I agreed with the policy because I thought the subsidy was inefficient, but I thought he was going to tackle the corruption within the subsidy system itself. I didn't understand why you're punishing the whole country for the sins of a few. I thought we could target those who were taking advantage of the situation and target even the idea that we're even consuming that much. When you start plugging those holes, you will find out that we are losing more than we're actually gaining. So for me, some of those things. But like I said, he's doing his best, and inshallah, he'll be able to consolidate on some of his policy decisions.
Were your father to be alive, do you think Nigeria will be in this position? I know you tell me you're not God, but just taking a look, were he to be alive and being president today, do you think we'll be in this state that we're in?
Definitely not. I definitely believe that.
Why?
Well, first of all, you see, the thing is, like I said, Abiola is somebody who was very meticulous in everything he did. He didn't leave anything to chance. So, planning for being president, he started in '83. In '83, when he wanted to run under NRC or something, where they now said the ticket was not for sale. So he had started for a long time. He had already started meeting with professors, devising strategies of solving problems. This was not somebody, he was even talking about, I need to know the marginal cost of 1 liter of, when somebody goes to that level of critiquing his policy, he wants to go to the marginal cost. He's trying to understand that before I can tell you that I'm going to charge you this for this, I need to know. So this is where I would think that Abiola will not have stood by and seen 4 of our refineries not functioning. This is just not what, it will just not happen, because what will happen is that he understood that Nigerian people will fix Nigerian problems. First of all, I have to show Nigerian people that I believe in them. If my leader does not believe in me, who am I? He needed to show. So he said, I won't give Nigerian people's fish, which is what is happening. They just give people fish, handouts, give you rice, handouts. Teach me how to fish. This is not rocket science now. We talk about this. This is 2026. We're talking about this like we're still in the Stone Ages. This is not the case. So I think that we missed the point. What Abiola was suggesting was not a situation where he wanted to be the alpha and omega. After his 8 years, he would have handed over to the next person and the country will move on. But the most important thing is that we need to understand that we are our own salvation. If we start believing in ourselves, things will change. Leadership needs to understand that they lead at our own behest. They don't lead because they are better. No, they lead at our own behest. We need to educate our own people. We need to encourage our own people, and we need to fix our own problems. So, for instance, instead of giving me a minimum wage, I'll give you a living wage. I will show you are more than important. If I give you more money than you can think of, you might not, at that point, you won't have to now start lying about how many liters came in to one pot because you're trying to collect a kickback from the people who brought the thing. When I don't give you what I know would help you take care of your family, I can now object when you now take matters into your own hands and help your own family. How? It doesn't work.
Wow. All right. I just want you to take a step back, do some calculations, from the military rule to the Fourth Republic, where we now are, that's looking at from 1999 to present day. What are those things that you see us do that will make you believe that we have made some progress democratically? Have we made any progress?
Oh, no. There's a lot of progress that has been made. I will not sit here and tell you that nothing has changed. For instance, we've had uninterrupted democratic rule. No matter how flawed, it's still a democratic rule. It's better than any military government. I'll tell you that. So I know personally, from my own personal experience, military government is just not the way to go, especially in a country with so many different ethnic groups and different religions. But like I said, even when we began, I think we also began on the wrong premise. Abacha had died. That 5 years of Abacha's rule was more like tyranny. I was on exile. Ashwaju was on exile. And people were running helter skelter, looking at people were scared. It was very trying time for the Nigerian people. And then Abiola, the day he was supposed to be released from prison, where people thought, okay, at least there's some lights at the end of the tunnel, is now announced to be dead as well. So the shock was also another. So it just seemed more like scripted. Abacha goes, they saw everybody, apparently people were jubilating across the world, across the country. Then the person that they wanted to come out dies, people start crying. It's like up and down. It's like there's somebody who's playing these tricks on us. Like, they're not shaking it. So it was very traumatic. Anyway, then we bring in Baba, His Excellency Obasanjo. He comes in, on my father's back. Literally on my father's back, from the same place for my father. They actually went to the same school. So you wonder where and mostly probably where they were, because I heard that he took his girlfriend or something. I don't know if it's the case. You will have to ask him, he's still alive. But whatever the case is, he comes in, goes around the world saying Abiola is not the Messiah. Like Abiola had already died, so Abiola wasn't even saying anything. So why are you still bringing up the dead? But like I said, I think we started off from the wrong premise. The same people who orchestrated the annulment of the 1993 election became the leaders of the democracy that my father died for. These were the people who said they will kill Abiola. The same people who said that they will never let Abiola rule. They will not let him rest. So it was kind of funny. But like I said, it was democracy. People had a choice. It was better than the alternative, where we didn't have any choice at all. Moving forward, I think we're going to get better. But like I said, we need to get involved. We need to get involved.
All right, let's take it a bit personal now. There have been public discussions about the Abiola family estate and internal disputes. So do you see any connection between unresolved family matters and a broader challenge of preserving your father's, political legacy, and even any connection?
Oh, there's definitely a connection. You see, if we're all speaking from different sides of our mouth, we can never get anything done, right? So the fact that there's no cohesion, there's no unity in the family is definitely going to affect the way we, the legacy in some way, which is definitely not what my father wanted. I would say this. My father was somebody who liked to bring people together. He was more of a nation builder. He wasn't somebody who liked to divide. So this was definitely against my father's. This would have been definitely against my father's wishes. But suffice to say, from my mom's side, we're very united, especially through the traumatic events of the June 12th saga. But even as I grew older, and I started trying to question some of the issues with the family estates and some of the issues with the will and all these things, I was able to get closer to some of my other siblings. So we have now a group. We have like a joint group with the rest with all my siblings except the first family, which is my brother Kola, which is the people that were actually having these arguments back and forth with. But like I said, these are family issues, and when I was younger, I was very vocal about it. But now I just think that it's best I keep those things, because we're trying to resolve them internally, and we're going to try to do that. But definitely, it does affect us as a family, but then also in a larger sense in the nation, because the Abiola name is not just for us as Abiolas. Mm-hmm. It's a national name. It's Abiola was not just my father. He was the father of the nation. He believed in Nigerian people. He sacrificed almost everything, to make sure that the Nigerian people understood that they were also loved. And I think that's important that I understand. When I remember when I came back, I went to some of my dad's former companies. I realized they were all closed down. But the staff that worked there were very passionate about, the Abiola. So when I tried to renovate some of those properties, they came and they were challenging me, thinking I was trying to sell it. So you can see that there was so much passion. So Abiola was just not his children. It was all his employees. It was all his friends, associates. He believed, I bet you, Abiola would have considered himself a friend of all Nigerians to begin with. So I think it's sad that we as a family are not even united to push that agenda forward. But individually, we're doing our part. My sister Hafsa does hers. My brother Lakes does his. Jamie works for the government, so he's doing something to give back. Me, I'm here talking about that. So we're all doing something to push the pendulum forward.
That's something that everyone is doing. You are doing something. Your sister, your brother. Does it have any way connected to politics? Anyone willing to push that area?
Well, I definitely want to get into politics. I've always believed that I would cherish the opportunity to serve in any capacity, right? So even though I'm not I don't have a fancy title by my name, I do as much as I can to support the government in power. And I think that's just what democracy is about. Like, we have an opportunity to elect a leader. Once that leader is elected, it's incumbent on all of us to push that leader forward by supporting that leader to accomplish his goals, no matter how divergent those goals are from our own perspective, because collectively we can achieve more than divided. So I think it's so like, for instance, I'm very close with the first son, Barrister Sheyi Tinubu. He's a wonderful gentleman. We grew up together, when we were in exile in the United States. So he's a wonderful guy, and he's doing so much for the Nigerian youth, pushing our own agenda. And I think that's important, that we understand that we are supposed to be the leaders of tomorrow, but apparently that tomorrow just never comes. But if we take that, if we understand the power that we have in our numbers, and we start having those discussions, which we're going to be doing in June 12th, we have this engagement at the MKO Abiola Stadium, which we're going to be, it's going to just be a youth-led event, talking to ourselves and getting ourselves organized towards whatever direction they want to go. So I'm not going to go and tell anybody to vote for any candidate. I'll just tell you to vote for your conscience and don't sell your vote.
So between now and a couple of years, we might find you standing for election?
Inshallah.
Wow, lovely. Now, is there something specific or a certain area you'd like this government to do something, at least to make sure your father's legacy, at least June 12, is brought back to our psyche?
Yeah, well, Abiola said it's farewell to poverty. We need to solve this issue. You know, it's very funny because I can tell you that there's a correlation between the level of poverty and criminality. You push me to the wall hard enough, I will break the wall and I'll take your money. That's how life is. I can't eat, I'm hungry. My rationale changes. It's not now, I'm not thinking about you as a brother. I'm thinking about you as what can I tell you so I can extort from you? So now I'm not, so we've become so jaded in this, because most people don't have, like before it was maybe 101, I think that was the formula. But now if you even see one, if you see one, you know, so I think it's important that we address that issue, because some of these kidnappings we're seeing this collusion between communities and the kidnappers, because they just don't know, they don't see any way out. And the thing about this is, you know, when you're pushed to the corner and you're not educated enough to even think outside the box to how you can solve your problems, your decision making is skewed already because you're hungry. Now, what you decide to do, you don't. So you can't. I can't really even say I blame some of these communities, because government presence has just not reached them. We need to start to address these issues from the source. It's very, very important. And I think Ashwaju, His Excellency, is actually doing that, because he has already tried to do this local government autonomy thing where he's giving them the money directly. Hope these people are using the money properly. The governors are getting so much money now. Apparently, they should be using it properly. I don't know what they're doing with it. But the most important thing here is that the Nigerian people themselves, we have to start looking at ourselves as the solution to our problems, not as enemies of one another. We are now, there's some kind of friction where we are looking at how I can take advantage of my brother, how I can take advantage of my sister, and we cannot afford that, especially in a country like Nigeria, with too many to afford to fail. When it comes to security, like we've spoken about, like I tell you, it's not just a one-faceted solution to it. There's so many aspects to it. Like I told you, poverty levels, increased insecurity. That's just normal. Everybody knows that. You know, when you don't address the needs of the people who are supposed to solve the problem, like the police, the army, you know, you're not addressing their needs. You know, you'll be wondering if their objective is in line with yours. So like I told you, this is just basic common sense now. A living wage. I need, you know, in the United States where I lived, we had, in my neighborhood, I had like 2 officers who lived in the neighborhood next to me. And the neighborhood was it was an affluent neighborhood. So the people that would live there would have to have, so you have to give somebody a sense of you know, like a community. Like, you know, I'm sending you into the bush to enrich your life. You need to know that your children are taken care of. You know, I'm sending you, you know, to another state. You need to know that, you know, certain things, you know, because if I'm fighting in the bush and I'm thinking that my baby doesn't have milk to drink, you know, there's a conflict of interest there. So I think it's important that we need to figure that out first. Once we do that, once we start to address those issues, like internally, you know, we can now start breaking down the issues to just who are just the hardened criminals, you know, because not everybody is a criminal. Also, I think that deterrence needs to be made clear. You kill somebody, you kidnap somebody, they'll kidnap you too. It's very simple, you know. And then those, you know, like, because we had a situation where we had terrorists captured, a couple years in prison. They said that they've repented. Repented to who? They should repent to God. It's very simple. I am not even happy. I wouldn't even entertain this nonsense. I would just not entertain it. And so you have killed 5 people. The victims are there crying for their loved ones, and then you tell me that you've repented. I'll first slap you, then I'll kill you too. Go and repent to God. It's very simple. What that does is it sends a message down the line that you do this. This is what you see. You do anyhow. I think that's the saying. You see anyhow. So that's life. You know, it's just that we're not doing these things. The laws are there. We're not applying them. The laws only apply to a certain few. You know, so, you know, if we have taken the time to make laws for ourselves, and yet we choose not to follow the laws, who do you blame then? You know, we blame ourselves. Abiola said it. He said it himself when he was being led out of the house, being arrested for treason charges. He said that they're taking me to prison. Abiola, very funny man. They're leading him to his gulag, and he's laughing with them on BBC, saying that it's okay, we'll get peace. We don't want the peace of the graveyard. It's very funny that he said that, because I think he wanted to make it clear that the Nigerian people had already won the battle by showing that they can choose their own leader. The victory was won. Him being alive or dead was besides the point. Or being arrested or anything was besides the point. The Nigerian people need to understand that they're the ones with the power. The 93 million people with voters cards, maybe by now we're like 100 and something million people with voters cards, should all come out and go and vote. How many people? By the time you see a crowd of people, your head will your head will be correct. Even if you've even been to boarding school in Nigeria, where maybe a guy messes up and you see a bunch of guys gang up on him, the second he sees them coming, he knows he has messed up.
He will rearrange.
He will respect himself. If he had money to buy anybody, he will calm down. Even the elections for June 12, people were still doing these manipulative things, but it was clear that Abiola had won because it was open. It was in your face. You can't rig you can't rig the truth. You hear me? So it's just that simple. We have the power. Nigerian youth at the largest population in the country. Go out, get your PVCs. You know what I mean? Defend your votes. Don't sell it to anybody. Don't collect the rice, because I like rice too. Collect the rice, but still vote your conscience. You know what I mean? You can collect it, and they're gonna come and meet you and say what. And I also think that I want to also encourage our armed forces. They're doing so much. We're not even honoring them enough. I remember when I was in America, any soldier you saw, everybody would be like, thank you for your service. And the guy didn't even do anything. He was just an accountant in the office somewhere, but you're still thanking him for his service because it's still a service. These are selfless jobs that we need to start to encourage them more. And I'm hoping that in the near future, things will get better, inshallah.
Things will get better by the grace of God.
And that's Democracy Day special conversation with Abdul Abiola, son of democracy icon MKO Abiola. In Abiola's words, only real democracy can move our nation forward towards progress and earn her the respect she deserves from the international community. Thank you so much once again, Abdul.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Stay informed, stay engaged, and keep the conversation going. Visit The Real Media NG and follow @The Real Media NG across all social media platforms. I am Isaac Barry, and this is The Real Broadcasting Network.